Hey guys, today we're going to have a little talk about boosters, specifically with regard to COVID. Caitlin asked in the Q&A if I could talk a little bit about the vaccine and how it works against new variants of COVID, like the Delta variant. And that gets us into really the larger question of boosters and whether booster shots will be needed or not. As you know, the US government is about to come out and say, or maybe by the time you see this, they've already said it, that we're all going to need boosters about 8 months after we get our initial COVID vaccine. So I thought I would talk a little bit about booster shots generally, why you need them, how they work with COVID, and just to give you a sense of why it's needed, but also to allay any concerns that the vaccine isn't working. Now, I've got some notes here because there's a lot of information and it's scientific stuff, so I want to make sure I'm right. So we'll start with this. So a couple different vaccines that require more than one shot, and basically booster shots. Polio vaccine, for example, it used to require 4 doses. I mean, we don't get it anymore because we more or less got rid of polio. Hepatitis vaccine, I actually got that one just to be safe. 3 doses over a period of time. The HPV, human papillomavirus, more or less, I'm probably getting it wrong, well, however you pronounce it, HP as in Paul V. That's the virus that can give you ovarian cancer, that can give you oral cancer, that can give you anal cancer, all sorts of really nasty cancers. And Gardasil, right, the vaccine that was developed for especially young kids to get, but also any age up until maybe middle age, it's worth getting to try to stop you from getting HPV and therefore stop getting these cancers. Actress Farrah Fawcett died of anal cancer, of all things, very famous for my generation, and anal cancer is caused by HPV. So that's a vaccine that you have to get over a 6-month period, 3 shots. I got 1 shot, then I had to wait a month, get the 2nd shot, then wait 5 months and get the 3rd shot. Well, those are boosters. And what happens after each shot, you develop some immunity, but it's not enough. The next one comes, you get even more. What they found so far is after the 3rd shot, you build up enough immunity that hopefully it's immunity for life. We're going to see. The shot's relatively new. Over time, we'll see if we need another HPV booster. Tetanus, you need a booster every 10 years. That's something we all probably know, right? You kind of worry, remember every time you go to the emergency room, at least in the States, you sit there and go, oh God, when did I get my last tetanus shot? I have no idea. Because every 10 years or so, either you have to have your blood tested to see if you still have the antibodies, or whatever the protection is, or you have to get a tetanus shot every 10 years. Again, you got to get a booster. Doesn't mean tetanus shots don't work. Now, I'm going to do several different videos here. This will be part 1 because I can tell I'm already hitting up to the 3-minute mark. I'm going to talk next about specifically the COVID shots and the boosters and how the vaccine works over time. Okay, so let me stop right now and then we'll continue in part 2. Hey guys, so this is part 2 of our COVID booster discussion. Why are we talking about getting boosters? What does it mean? Does it mean the vaccine isn't working? It doesn't mean that. So let's talk about the boosters. Now, this was a really good Twitter thread I just read this morning from Andy Slavitt. Andy was, get his exact title down here, was a senior advisor to President Biden for COVID response for the first 6 months of the Biden presidency to help the president organize everything together. And previously, Andy had worked on Medicaid and Medicare, top scientific medicine guy. He's a big healthcare expert here in DC. And Andy did a really nice Twitter thread this morning. You can follow him on Twitter, look for him, Andy Slavitt. But did a really nice thread this morning explaining why a booster was needed for the COVID shot and why it isn't bad news. So let me start with this. So Andy starts by saying the first COVID shot you get creates a really big antibody response in your body, creates lots of antibodies, and that antibody response is made even bigger by the 2nd dose you get, okay? Now, the antibody response is what allows the immune system to act fast in the face of an invasion of a virus. So in other words, when you get infected by a virus, let's assume you've been vaccinated. You get infected by a virus, the first thing that happens is your antibodies go, oh my God, I know that virus, and they react immediately. There are other parts of your immune system that react too, but they react more slowly. We'll get to that, okay? So the antibodies, first thing, 2 shots makes you get a lot of antibodies, and they react immediately to the virus when it enters your system. This is from Andy. That quick response is key to preventing symptoms, particularly when there's a high viral load like Delta. Now, what that means is, it's really interesting. I was really enjoying sort of learning about this. So you got Delta, which floods you with virus, right? Now, flooding with a lot of virus means you might be able to get sick really quick from Delta compared to a disease that maybe gives you less virus or takes longer to build up the amount of virus in your body, right? Well, with a disease like Delta that can get you sick so quickly, you want a really fast immune response, a fast antibody response to really clamp it down immediately and stop you from either getting symptoms or from getting serious illness, right? The sicker you get, the more it invades and takes over your body, the bigger chance of getting symptoms and the bigger chance of having serious or even death resulting from it, right? So the quick response is from the antibodies. That's the thing that stops you from showing symptoms, especially with Delta. The antibody response wanes over time. So the antibody response, sorry, my leg is itching from allergies today, excuse me. The antibody response wanes over time, and basically it starts to diminish. It's not as strong, the antibody response over time. In the case of Delta, the antibodies are providing less punch than they did in the weeks or months after you got the shot. So what they're finding with Delta, possibly, and we're going to stop again and go to part 3, is that over a 6 to 8 month period, your response starts to decrease, and that's why maybe you need a booster. We'll talk next in part 3. Hey everybody, this is part 3 of our COVID booster discussion. Now, we were just talking about antibodies and how over time, after you get the COVID shot, maybe 6 to 8 months after, your antibodies start to go down. They're not responding as well to the virus, right? And remember, the antibodies are the thing in your immune system that respond immediately to the virus. They're the first line of attack, I don't know what we'd call it in the military, but that first troops that you send out to go after the virus are the antibodies. So if they start going down, what happens? You've got a greater chance of the virus growing in your body before it gets attacked, right? Before your body's able to launch a counterattack. And the more virus in your body, the better chance of you getting symptoms, the better chance of you getting seriously ill. So I'm giving you, and what I'm going through is the Twitter feed of Andy Slavitt. He was the top COVID coordinator or senior advisor for President Biden, but also a top healthcare expert here in DC. And he did a really neat Twitter thread this morning, just walking through what's going on with the booster. So Andy says, okay, so your antibodies are now starting to go down 6 months, right? 6 to 8 months after you get the shot. The antibodies are going down. But what happens? Our body, this is from Andy, remembers the COVID infection because there's 2 other parts of the immune system that still fight it as well. Memory B cells, B as in boy, and T cells, T as in Tom. Okay? So there are 2 other parts of your immune system that also get revved up from getting the vaccine, and they, at least so far, don't seem to wane. So the antibody starts to go down, but your memory B cells and your T cells so far are staying just as strong. Now, Andy says, memory B cells and T cells are how we remember to fight off measles, even though we had a shot as a kid, right? But now it's 40 or 50 years later for some of us, or 60, 70 years. Your body remembers, not because you got any more antibodies, but because you got the memory B and T cells that are still there and say, hey, I know how to fight this, and they can fight it. Now, so after a period of time, even though your antibodies diminish, again, I'm going to keep reading parts of Andy's thing as we talk, even though your antibodies diminish, you're able to still blunt infections before they get serious because you've got memory B and T cells. So what does this mean for COVID? Over time, we are more like, over time meaning after you get the vaccine, over a period of time, again, maybe 6 months, 8 months, it depends, they're still investigating this, we're more likely to have symptomatic infections, even if we're vaccinated, because our antibodies, the first line of defense, start to go away, right? So because the antibodies don't respond immediately, the COVID can grow in your body enough to actually start giving you symptoms, but then the memory B and T cells come in. So we start to get more symptomatic, but we haven't gotten to the serious disease yet. All it is symptoms, okay? But we still have protection against hospitalization and death because the memory B, as in boy cells, and T cells are still around to provide a robust response to infection. We're about to stop this video. Let me put this up in video 4. We're going to talk then about serious illness and hospitalization and whether the vaccine still keeps working, and it does. Hey folks, this is part 4 of my video series about booster shots for COVID and why we need them and how it works and whether it means the vaccine isn't working. It doesn't mean that. So we were just talking about your antibodies waning, right, after a 6 to 8 month period, whatever, after you've gotten the COVID inoculation. But how your memory B as in boy cells and T as in Tom cells are still around and still quite active so that they still fight against the virus even though your antibodies may not be fighting as much. Well, what that means is your antibodies go down, they're the first line of defense, so if they're not responding as well, the virus is having an easier time latching onto your body and growing, so now maybe you're going to start showing symptoms, right? Because it's not being fought as strongly as it was before. But then the memory B and T cells kick in and they stop the virus, if you've been vaccinated, from giving you serious symptoms, hospitalization, or death. So this is really the key point, is that, and I'll read with Andy again, we still have protection against hospitalization and death because the memory B cells and T cells are still around to provide a robust response to the infection. So that's key. Now I'm going to talk in a minute about some other studies that have given people some concern, but more or less what they found to date is that even though our antibodies start to go down over 6 to 8 months, all it means so far, hopefully, is that you have a greater chance of having symptomatic infection versus getting an infection, not having symptoms, and not even knowing you got sick at all. But the symptoms, they still might be like a light cold. Maybe you'll have sniffles, right? Or when I get a flu, I get a backache. Maybe that's all you're going to get. But so far, the data shows that the vaccine still protects you, even when the response is waning for the antibodies. Those other cells, the B cells and T cells, stop you from getting serious illness or hospitalization. That's why it's so important to get this vaccine, and that's why it's not like the vaccine isn't working anymore. Now, let's talk about Israel. Some of the data. This is I don't remember which video. This is 3 or 4. I don't even remember now. The data from Israel. Israel has shown declining efficacy for preventing mild or asymptomatic overall serious with the elderly. Okay, let me tell you what that is. So the Israeli data showed that what some experts described as, we still got time, as continued erosion of the efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine against mild or asymptomatic infections. So meaning that the Pfizer vaccine over time in Israel wasn't working as well to stop mild infections from appearing, or asymptomatic, meaning you got infected but you didn't have symptoms. Okay, so in general, so basically it was less effective at stopping people from having symptomatic infection, and among the elderly, it was less effective at stopping serious infection. That's an important point. And again, we're getting to the end of the video. I'll explain that in the next clip. Hey folks, this is part of my series discussion about the COVID boosters, why you need them, how they work, why they show that the vaccine is still working, okay? We were just talking about data out of Israel, and the data out of Israel was showing that yes, the reason Israel's interesting is not only did they vaccinate a large part of their population and a tremendous amount of seniors, but they started vaccinating early and they did it fast. So they probably got their vaccines a month or 2 or more before a lot of us did in the States. So it gives us a better chance to look at the data over time and see, hey, after 8 months, how's the vaccine doing, right? So what they found in Israel was, over time, something like 8 months, the vaccine was in fact less effective at stopping you from getting symptoms from the illness. You would get symptoms, and it also was less effective at just stopping asymptomatic illness at all. Meaning just I get sick, but I don't even know I'm sick because I don't have symptoms. So more people who are vaccinated would, with the Delta variant, and over time, start to show symptoms and get symptomatic illness, but for everybody but seniors, it was still a mild case. For seniors, you started to see more serious cases. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. One is, as we said, over time, your antibody response starts to go down, and that antibody response is the thing that right away jumps in when you get sick and helps stop you from getting serious disease. But with seniors, you got a second problem. Seniors have an issue just like people with HIV or lupus might work this way too, I'm not sure. But people who either have a compromised immune system or have drugs to suppress their immune system, like somebody who got organ transplants. When you get an organ transplant, you have to take drugs for the rest of your life to kind of suppress your immune system so that your body doesn't attack the organ, right, that you got from somebody else. So with seniors, their immune system doesn't work as well. So you'll often find with seniors, like there's a flu vaccine for seniors that's actually stronger than what younger people get, because seniors need a bigger dose to create a bigger, or not even a bigger, to help convince their immune system to react as strongly as yours or mine might react with a smaller dose, okay? So with COVID, it looks like seniors are, with the Pfizer vaccine, at least from the Israeli data, are having a greater chance of serious illness after 6 to 8 months. So that's why in Israel, they started giving shots for everybody. I keep seeing different data, but I think it was age 50 and up. Either age 50 or 60 and up, they're giving everybody booster shots because they realize as you get older, you've got your immune response isn't as good. Now, there's a UK study as well I wanted to mention, published in July of this year, so last month, showing 94% Pfizer efficacy against the Alpha variant, against getting it at all and showing even minor symptoms or asymptomatic, and that efficacy dropped to 88% for symptomatic disease. Again, all we're saying though is that Pfizer's efficacy dropped from 94 to 88 against Delta, but that was just for symptomatic disease, meaning maybe you'll get, cold symptoms. Oop, next video. Hey everybody, this is my final video of the video series about COVID boosters, why you need them, how they work, why they are not evidence that the vaccine isn't working. We were just talking about some studies showing that that Pfizer goes down in efficacy over time. But what they're showing, and I've got the UK study here that I'm citing, is that Pfizer's efficacy in stopping you from getting symptomatic illness, meaning just a mild symptoms. This isn't talking about serious. Just from getting mild symptoms drops from 94% to 88%. But that's just the efficacy for stopping you from getting sniffles, which I don't care. I don't care if I get a mild cold. I don't want to get serious disease where I have to go to the hospital or I've got a lingering illness or I die, right? But there was no reduction in protection against serious illness and hospitalizations under the UK study. So what the study in Great Britain showed in the United Kingdom was that even though Pfizer's efficacy dropped over time for stopping you from getting sick at all, but again, mild, it didn't drop so far in stopping you from getting serious illness or hospitalization. Now again, let's go back to what I said in the earlier video. It sounds like that's because your antibodies start to go down, as we said, over time, but your memory B and T cells are still there really active. So the antibodies go down, you have a less robust immune response initially to the virus, so you start to show symptoms. Then the memory B and T cells that the vaccine created kick in, and they stop you from getting serious illness or hospitalization. So again, vaccine still works really well. It's great news, actually, when I read that this morning, that it's not, so far, the UK data is showing that it's not that the vaccine is less effective at stopping serious illness or hospitalization in most people. It just is less effective at stopping symptomatic illness. And then you got the Israeli data that I talked about in the earlier video that suggests that seniors, maybe even people over 60, it depends on the data, 65, it looks like for them, the vaccine may start to wane over time also for serious illness, so that the first people that get a booster, in Israel at least, are now seniors. Because their immune system isn't as strong, they probably didn't have as strong an immune response to the vaccine that you or I would have. Final little point here. Oh, this was interesting. I may have to do another video after this because I've got some data on flu vaccines that I looked up. So flu vaccines, why you've got to get them every year and what happens. So flu vaccines, we know the flu virus mutates every year, right? And that therefore you got to get a shot every year. But there's a couple of reasons you need a shot every year. Over time, within a few weeks of getting the flu shot, your protection against the flu starts to go down, your immune system. I thought for sure the flu shot worked, you got it, and that strain you were fine with forever, but it's not true. Let me stop the video and go to our final video and we'll finish talking about the flu. Hey guys, we've been talking about the booster shots and the COVID variant, the Delta variant, and whether now that we need a booster, whether that shows the vaccine isn't working. And I've shown you in the earlier videos that in fact it does not mean the vaccine isn't working. The vaccine's working great. Final thing I wanted to talk about was the flu shots and how every year we get a new flu shot, right? I'm trying to give you an example of another illness where we get boosters every year and we've accepted that fact, that we've got to get a new flu shot every year. Big deal, right? If we end up needing a COVID shot every year, and by the way, that's not clear still. Liana Wen, who's really good, a doctor, was on CNN earlier, and she was saying, for all we know, maybe this is like other shots, like HPV I was talking about, where you need 3 shots. Maybe you need 3 shots to get lifetime immunity or 10-year immunity, like tetanus. Who knows, right? We're going to find out. But if you need a shot every year or every 8 months, that's the way the flu works, folks. So we got another disease we got to worry about, like the flu. In any case, the research I found, which is really interesting, because I heard this last year and I was looking at it again today, that when you get the flu shot, the efficacy of the flu shot, the effectiveness starts to drop within a few weeks after you get the shot, which I had no idea. I thought you got a new shot every year simply because there's a new variant, and that is true. But you also have to get a new shot because the effectiveness just starts going downhill after even a month, which is why one thing I read suggested that you get your flu shot in October and not August, so that it really gets you over the hump of the flu season in the middle of winter, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. So researchers from Kaiser Permanente, North California, showed that the risk of contracting the flu climbs about 16% for every 28 days after you've been vaccinated. That's why, any case, that's why you need a new flu shot every year, but also, as we said, new variants, which frankly sounds a little familiar. That's just like COVID. All right, putting my notes down. So to recap, at this point, we need boosters because over time, your antibody response goes down. So your body isn't able to fight as quickly against the virus when you get infected, but your memory B cells and memory T cells, B as in boy, T as in Tom, are just as effective. So they keep fighting, even though your antibodies go down, but they take a while to kick in. So you're probably, here's the virus, right? The virus comes and your antibodies aren't fighting as much. So the virus starts picking up and finally your memory B cells and T cells kick in once you're already getting symptoms. So now you're getting mild symptoms, but the big guns come in and they stop you from getting seriously ill. That's why the vaccine is still worth it. That's also why, final point, I guess, there was a discussion on Andy's Twitter thread, Slavit, that I mentioned earlier, as to whether the booster so far, for most people who aren't seniors, is simply to stop you from getting symptomatic illness. You may not even need the booster to stop you from getting serious illness at this point because the original vaccine does that. Okay, that's my COVID Booster 101 for dummies. Hope it was interesting. Promise not to do as long of videos in the future. Thanks, hey, everybody. So I see my Afghanistan video explainers are doing well, and some people have asked, who am I to be talking about foreign policy? Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My background is a law degree and a master's in foreign service, joint degree from Georgetown. Foreign service is basically Georgetown's version of international public policy. How do you legislate and make decisions on foreign policy, right? I speak 5 languages pretty much fluently: Spanish, French, Italian, Greek, English. I've also studied Russian and Portuguese, but don't really speak those unless I'm drunk. I have worked for a U.S. Senator, a Republican, mind you, for 5 years as a foreign policy aide and an arms control aide in the United States Senate. I have worked at the World Bank. I have worked at the United Nations. I have traveled to probably 30 countries or so. I've worked in, I don't even know, 10 countries, I'm not even sure. I've lived in Greece, France, and Argentina, in addition to the U.S. God, I've done consulting all over the place. I've done consulting in Spanish. I've done consulting in Italian. I've done consulting in French. Gosh, what else? Anyway, that's kind of a long way of saying I've been doing international work for about 30 years, in addition to a lot of domestic policy work as well here in Washington, D.C. But I'm not dumb on foreign policy. I don't claim to know everything about Afghanistan. It's not like I've been following it, day to day like somebody who works in Kabul might be. But I try to be well read. I try to read stuff. I try to get a diversity of views and then sort of synthesize it, which is also, frankly, the concept behind why I do this channel. Just trying to synthesize the news for folks and give it to you in a way that's easy to understand, but hopefully also explains a little bit about what's actually going on and how things work. So that's who I am, daring to weigh in on Afghanistan, and hope you found the videos useful.